Welcome, everybody, to the Burn Your Boats podcast. And finally, today, this is the day we have our first guest on the show. We wanted to lay down a little bit of work in the last few episodes to just get up a head of steam, if you will, and have some kind of track record in laying out our expertise. But we've wanted to bring a guest onto the show since day one. And Clark, today we've got a very special guest. Do you want to tell everybody who we will be interviewing today?
Well, according to Forbes in 2020, it was a shark in the desert. So we are talking to our good friend, Devon Kennard. He played in the NFL for 10 plus years, and he played at USC in college and played defense. He played for a couple teams. He played for the Cardinals last, played for the Giants, who I despise, and he played for the Lions as well, too. And David, I actually... it was cool because his dad, I was growing up a huge Cowboys fan, and his dad played for the Cowboys, so I remember watching him. So that's just a little bit of background about what he's done. You may have heard of him from, but he's also done some really, really cool things after the NFL, but also while he was in the NFL that you might find a little unique. David, talk to us a little bit about those before we hop into the show.
Well, I know nothing about the NFL, absolutely nothing, but I know a lot about Devon. And so if this conversation today is to wander into the nuances of NFL, you'll see me going quiet pretty quickly. But what I do know is I do know that Devon has faced a great deal of challenges in his life, challenges with injuries throughout his NFL career. And I know that he had a looming burn your boats moment in that everybody who is a professional athlete knows that they're going to retire in their early to mid 30s. If they're lucky, they get to last that long. And so where I find this conversation exciting to have is to talk to how a professional athlete understands that change in their lives from an emotional and financial perspective. A lot of people don't deal with it very well. And so we're going to get into that side of things. I think we'll spare you the NFL conversations. I'm sure Devon has all that out there in the world. But in terms of his real estate, his transition to being a real estate professional and his challenges in his life, I'm really excited. So, Clark, let's get into this. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Devon, his career and whatnot, so people know who we're talking to?
Yeah, so he was drafted by the Giants in 2014 in the 5th round, and he retired just last year to 2023. And to your point, he played almost 10 years for the Giants, the Lions, and the Cardinals. And that's a huge deal. That's very few people make that far. David, NFL, I don't know if you know what it stands for, but it stands for not for long. And so for someone to make it a full decade is really, really impactful. And I think a lot of his success has spilled over into his drive to become better and learn more. And he's very humble. And I know that's going to kind of come out in this interview. And so with that being said, David, let's jump right into it, and we'll introduce Devon Kennard, and we hope you enjoy it, guys. Thanks so much.
Welcome to the Burn Your Boats podcast with today's special guest, Devon Kennard. And now, your hosts, Clark Lunt and David Shaw.
All right, we're live. We're here. We finally have our first guest, Clark.
Finally.
What an exciting day it is today to introduce Devon Kennard. Hi, Devon.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure being your guys' first one. As soon as I saw you guys were starting this, I wanted to get on. Yeah. So thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. Well, you're our first guest for a reason, Devon. We had a fair few people who we could think of that would be a good first burn your boats candidate, but I can think of no person better than you, because the whole idea, Devon, of burn your boats in our mind is not that you're burning your boats, is quite oftentimes your boats are being burned, right? And you have what's, in addition to being having an exceptional life, you've lived in the years that you've been on this earth an incredibly exceptional life. But you have had this concept hanging over your head for a long time that you knew, and everyone around you knew, like that one day, and it could be next Sunday, your boats would be burned, and everything in your life would change. And it could be next week or the week after. And so that is why we wanted you here first, because I can think of nobody who's had that almost like gallows humor hanging over your head all the time. It's like, yeah, this is great. We're making a ton of money until next week. And so with that, welcome to the podcast. Clark, would you like to welcome Devon in, and then we'll get him started?
Yeah, Devon, I wanted to wear my I was talking to David about this earlier, and we were talking about how I grew up watching your dad play, and I'm a huge Cowboys fan, so I wanted to wear my Cowboys jersey, but we didn't feel like it was going to be professional enough on this financial podcast to wear a 1990s Dallas Cowboy jersey. So
I should have went and got a Super Bowl ring and broke it out for the pod.
there you go, man. That's a hell of a way to start it, man. So, but yeah, we're happy to have you, man. You're a great guy. We work together on a few projects. You kind of dig our area, we dig our own area, and we've always enjoyed kind of watching your growth and being able to see you transform from being in a very high intense, high pressure type industry, right? And now you're shifting and learning new skills, and it doesn't happen overnight, and you probably made some mistakes along the way. So talk to us a little bit about, this podcast is about burning boats, as we've alluded to. Talk to us a little bit about, what were some moments in your career that you actually had a moment where you're like, oh my God, what is next? Like, I'm literally either I'm burning my own boats or my boats are getting burned for me, and I've got to shift. I've got to pivot quickly. Talk to us about one or two moments that like really stand out in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, I love the podcast name and what you guys are doing, because I think everybody's boats is burning to some extent, and people are ignoring it. So, for me, coming out of high school, I was top 5 recruit in the nation, getting recruited to go to every college in the country. And at the start of college, my senior year of high school, tore my ACL, and then I faced a ton of injuries in college. So, being humbled in that way from being, the best athlete ever,
Right.
in the state of Arizona, top 5 in the country, and then going to college and facing, getting punched in the gut, my boats being burned for me, in the sense of football wasn't going that well for me. I was facing injuries, coaching changes, position changes, to where, I was like, wow, football is what I planned to do and what I thought was going to be the linchpin to my life, but it wasn't looking promising. And it really made me ask myself a question, like, do I want to be successful because of football, or do I want to be successful? And, that question for me is I wanted to be successful. So it was like, okay, I need to figure out what that looks like for me outside of football, because I have this vision of what I wanted my life to look like. And I thought football was going to be the pathway for that. But when that didn't look promising anymore, it was like, well, I still want that life. How am I going to achieve it? And the concept of my boats being burned for me was actually a blessing in disguise. In the moment, it felt like the worst thing ever. Like, why me? I dealt with depression, anxiety, anger. Like, I felt like I outwork anybody and anything that I'm doing, and seeing people having more success than I was. I went through periods of bitterness, frustration, jealousy. And, in the end, I learned a lot, because all of that prepared me for my life now, and made me a better football player, but also businessman and just person overall.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think that scar tissue that you're talking about is just always having that sense that, entropy is at play, right? You said, I love what you just said, by the way, that your boats are always being burned, if you realize it or not. is something I talk about all the time, Devon, is this concept of entropy, that there's always a state of order to disorder, right? And what you're saying here is that, here you are, a 22-year-old guy, or 20-year-old guy, your entire identity, your entire life is based on this concept of just one direction, and then boom. And then at that point, that wasn't as you say, an extremely emotional event in your life. But that wasn't the last time that your boats were burned, because you got like 10 more stories behind that one. So I don't want to shortcut anything here, but can you move from there? So you worked hard, you got yourself fit, and I know your story. To all our listeners out there, we've known Devon since he was active in the NFL. It's not like we know him since then, but we knew you when you were a player. And so in those scenarios, I know the last few years of your career, that's obviously an extremely emotional period as well. A lot of highs and a lot of lows. So being an NFL player, everybody aspires and looks up to NFL players. Like, oh, they make all this money, they make all this. I'll bet you $1 million during that period, you had nothing but anxiety every season. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. Because while you're in the NFL, they're always trying to replace you with somebody younger, cheaper, faster, stronger, overall better. And, that immense pressure, and then the pressure to perform and perform well and at a high level and stay healthy. So it's like, okay, I'm playing well, but I got to stay healthy. And, there's all these pressures, and it's hard to talk about as a professional athlete, because you bring that to regular society and it's like, oh, woe me, the guy making $1 million playing football, you got to deal with pressures. But it's something that you got to be in to understand. Like when you're walking into a building and you're seeing them bringing guys in at your position to replace you. And, funny story about, that in general, I was coming off 2 of my best years playing for the Detroit Lions, led the team in sacks, was our defensive captain, playing some of my best ball. I was being paid well, and I was Walter Payton Man of the Year finalist. So I go to Miami. The Super Bowl was out there in Miami, and the head coach, the GM, and the president of the team came out to Miami, was at the honors event with me at all the events. And they're telling me, like, you're such a big part of what we're doing, what we're building here. You're a cornerstone piece. And 2 weeks after that was my wedding with my wife. They called me the day of my wedding. I got all my teammates there, Matthew Stafford, Marvin Jones, like the whole Detroit Lions team. And they called me, congratulations. I know all the guys are there. You have a blast. 3 weeks after that, it's free agency. I'm just finishing a workout, getting a massage actually, and I get a call from the GM, and they're releasing me because we've been in contract negotiations about, hey, I've been playing really well. I didn't have any guaranteed money left on my deal. It's time to restructure our contract. They're like negotiating well with my agent, and then out of the blue, they're like, we're not going to go that route. We're signing a guy that wasn't even in my position, but they're paying him a lot of money and didn't think they could pay me as well. And they released me. So it was like, sometimes getting your boats burns isn't like slow and gradual. It's out of the blue at times. And that was another major humbling moment. Like I'm at my peak. Like you go during those years in Detroit, like you land in Detroit and you're seeing billboards with my face on it, and you go to the stadium, and I'm at the peak of my career, and out of nowhere, get hit like that. And that it taught me a lesson of the business of football and how hostile. And that was in the middle of COVID. All my stuff was in Detroit. I was back in Arizona. So I had to move out of Detroit without even going back. I had to trust movers to go into my home. So, it's a blessing being in the NFL, but it comes with challenges that it's sometimes hard for people to grasp.
Devon, it's interesting you say that, because a lot of our listeners, we get a lot of feedback, right, from people and what I've noticed, the common thread is that like a lot of guys and girls in their 40s, right, they're kind of at the peak of their like career a little bit, and they're starting to look over their shoulder, and they're seeing that 28-year-old that doesn't have kids, that lives in a 1-bedroom apartment, that's hustling until 8 o'clock at night. And yes, the 45-year-old has more experience. They know more about the products. They have better relationships. and they can feel them on their, behind them. And it's funny when you're talking with like them, like we hear this every single day out in the career, in the business world of like, you're hot today and tomorrow you're yesterday's news, and someone's coming for that job, and they're going to be cheaper, and they're going to thank you for it, saying, pay me 30% less and I'm going to bust through doors for you. So when that happened to you, right, just like the person listening to this that's feeling that anxiety of someone coming for their job, and they've got all this experience and all this wherewithal, how long, what was your state of mind, man? Like, how did you feel? How long did you sulk? Did you reach out to people? Like, what was that like immediate next few steps that you took once you got the call saying, Devon, you're going to be man of the year. We love you. You're the cornerstone of our franchise. And then it's all gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's a humbling experience. And even what you're mentioning just now about, the 40-year-old and in that position, what I just wrote, I'm writing a book right now and I'm finishing it with Bigger Pockets. And one of the main points I want to make is like, I was forced to realize that reality because it's right in my face. But I think every American in corporate world, owning a business, what have you, is facing that same thing, but it's just not as obvious. That they want to replace you with somebody cheaper, better, faster, more hungry. And maybe it's not even a person, maybe it's AI, and we can, some of their role, we can delegate that to AI. And so I want to help people realize that like that same mindset I realized and I have to have as a football player, you got to take that same mindset into the workforce and whatever you do for a living, because it might not be as in your face, but don't make no mistake about it. They are trying to replace you, and it is your responsibility to take care of yourself financially to make sure you're prepared for that. Now you're not scrambling. To answer your question with that, Clark, though, I mean, my response to that was really like, okay, I'm grateful that I'm playing some of my best ball at the time. So a corporate person or the person running a business, like, your business is doing well. How do I pivot? How do I respond? And, I had other opportunities and I ended up signing with the Cardinals, and it all worked out, signed another big deal, but my circumstances changed. So all of a sudden I got paid well to go to the Arizona Cardinals, but it wasn't as good of a situation overall on the football field. So my years in Arizona, it was weird because it was like, all right, I'm paid well, but my situation isn't what it was. Like, I signed with the Cardinals and they had Chandler Jones, who's going to be a, Hall of Famer. And then Hassan Reddick, who's another guy in my position, who's had like 10 sacks the last 3 or 4 years, to where it was like, oh, now I'm a role player instead of being a guy. And then I was playing in my hometown. So now it's like,
no pressure.
The thing that I'm like proud of is like, all right, I'm getting paid well, but then it's like, I'm in my hometown and I got friends and family like wanting to come see me play, and I'm not playing as much, or things aren't going my way. And that was frustrating. And I think, the average listener can relate to like circumstances. You go through different phases of your career professionally, and not all of them are easy to stomach. You know what I mean? And it's like, how do you navigate that? How do you make the most out of the situation that you're dealt with?
Devon, you just said something where you're talking about AI is coming for your job. If you're in your 40s, it's just not as fast. Devon, if you've been listening to our podcast here at all, you'll know that that's what we talk about week in, week out. So it is so refreshing for our listeners to hear that from somebody else, not us. Us banging on about that is that we are, if you, no matter what your situation is, there's always something working away, eating at it, right? And so you have to get defensive about what it is your income stream is, because this is what we're going to get into talking about here. You have to realize that your income stream is probably pretty volatile if it's just one thing. If you're working for somebody, it's your income stream is at somebody else's discretion. Simple as that. Mm-hmm. And so, when did you decide, Devon, say, you know what, I'm going to keep the high income because I'm not going to give that up. But at what point did you decide I got to start, making some moves here, right, in business? Because everyone around you, well paid, well known, you're surrounded by famous guys, you're famous yourself. And yet you can see like the duality between what your external image and your internal ego is versus your that wolf on your shoulder saying you're about to get eaten, And so when did you decide to take action, and how did you kind of veer into real estate? Can you walk us through that? Because it seems obvious to me, but it's not obvious at all inside the locker room of the NFL. Can you tell me what, like, you're an outlier in many ways. So can you walk us through, that whole experience of going to Phoenix and then saying, you know what, I'm not going to let that happen to me again, because I'm sure that's what it was. It's like, I got to start, covering my behind here. Can you walk us through that whole experience?
Yeah, well, I mean, the mindset with the real estate started as soon as I got in the league, because what I faced in college. Like, so it's like I ended up balling out my last year of college, and then I ended up getting drafted, but I was drafted late in the bottom of the 5th round, 174th pick to the New York Giants. So it's like, great, I made it to the NFL, but I don't know how long. And I just saw how my college career went. So I was immediately like, I need to put myself in a position to where I can be successful outside of football, leverage the money I can make. So, there's CNBC articles of like, I drove my high school car my first year and a half in the NFL, a 2005 Kia Sorento. And it just because for me, my mindset was like, I want to save as much money as I can. So I was doing things like that. I bought my first property after my rookie year, but then, all the stories that I have and the adversities I faced while playing in the NFL, it just further like made me realize, like, man, I need to replace my income with, passive income or income coming from a different place. So my mindset was like, all right, how much money do I want to spend a month, and how do I replace that? So when the football ends, if I spend $10,000 a month, I have $10,000 a month coming in outside of football, to where like I'm playing football because I want to, not because I have to. And that pivot is very, very important to athletes, but I think any person, like figuring out what is my family, what does my household spend in a month? And, now you can times that by 12, and now you know what you spend in a year, and how can you try to replace that income? And, that perspective really changed my life when I really started looking at it that way, to where it was like, all right, if I know I want to spend $5,000 a month, 10,000, whatever, let me start to think about investments in a way to replace that, because now that's freeing. Now the football cuts me, but my lifestyle doesn't necessarily have to change. Or at the very least, I buy myself time. A lot of athletes they get suddenly cut, or, they're essentially fired. And now they got a nest egg of money, but no investments. And every month they see that money going down and down, and they're scrambling, trying to figure out, because they're not replacing that. If you spend $120,000 in a year and you have no other income coming in, every year you're 120K shorter. So realizing that's always been my mindset, and it's like attacking that the best way that I can.
So Devon, you have that forward-thinking mindset from an early age. I mean, you were doing that at what, 22, 23 years of age? I don't care if the NFL or not. There's not a lot of 23-year-olds that have that mentality, period, whether they work at UPS or they play for the Arizona Cardinals, right? And so it's interesting that you bring that up, because one of my big curiosities is when we talk to a lot of investors, just friends, family, network. And like one of the biggest challenges, like, well, I just don't have enough money. I would invest, but excuse. And usually that excuse is, well, if someone just gave me $1 million, you'll see like Facebook posts, right? If I gave you $1 million, what would you do with it? And you'll see these people with these elaborate plans. Well, I'd do 50,000 here and $100,000 there, right? Mm-hmm. So always the lack of having that. You've been in a position where you've been able to surround yourself with people where, they were able to have a lot of money. And honestly, it varies depending on position and time in the league and all that stuff. But I'm curious as to, you surround yourself with a lot of people that have the access to the capital. They have it in big chunks, yet there's not like everyone that retired from the NFL. They're not all Devon Kennards. And my question, and I'm interested in more of the psychology of, if you have the money, why is it that there aren't more athletes in general people that make large sums of money in their 20s, let's say, whether they're a rock star, they're an athlete, whatever that may be, why is it that more of those types of people don't have the same kind of forward thinking that you do? I'm just curious as to what the psychology of that looks like.
I would say just because you're successful doesn't mean you know how to handle money. Like, so you can be great at something. You can be a great athlete. You can be great at opening or starting a venture capital fund or starting a company, whatever it is that you do, but that doesn't mean you're good at money. So picture being young and you're thrown a lot of money and you're in a high pressure situation where you need to be very focused on what it is that you do for a living. And you get stuck in a mindset of like, I'm going to make enough. I'm going to like, it's not going to matter. Or like, you're so locked in what you're doing. It's easy to kind of put that off. Like you're trying to figure out how you're going to sack Aaron Rodgers on Sunday. You don't want to learn about how to get a 8% cash on cash return, how to manage a fix and flip. Like that sounds crazy. Why would I focus on that? I'm focused on Aaron Rodgers. So I think people are too hard on people who find success at an early age. I am unique in the sense of I had a father who played in the NFL and I got to see my dad's career a lot after he retired. So I thought a lot about what life looks like after football. And then I went through my own challenges, even collegiately. So I felt like I had a distinct advantage to have a different mindset, but I completely understand why so many guys don't. And then you got to think about the outside factors of if you're that one person in your family that changes everything and all of a sudden you got millions of dollars, how you think they're looking at you? Like, oh, help mama out, help your sister out. Oh, like I got this business plan, help me with this. So you're faced with a lot of challenges, and just because you're very successful doesn't mean you know how to handle it. And I think that would go over athletes and entertainers. They deal with that a lot. But I would say even like somebody starting a startup, they are starting a startup, but they're usually not crazy successful in it at early. Like it takes like a decade and now they've grown this $1 billion business or whatever. So while they're young, they still have like time. They don't have that as much pressure. But when you're throwing millions of dollars at a young age and you're trying to navigate that, it's a challenge.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a lot of people out there that are not athletes, that are not entertainers, but still have found either a great deal of success or relatively good success. But just because you know how to make money or you have a thing that makes money, that gives you absolutely no experience whatsoever in what to do with money, right? Having money by itself is just, it's a tool. It's useful, right? But you're gonna lose it very quickly. There's an old saying, it's not like what you make, it's what you keep, right? And so I want to go back on something. I want to ask you a question, but I want to go back on something that you just said. It was about, we were talking about like that anxiety of, knowing that some guys in the locker room were probably thinking along the same route as you, and some guys were not. But I recall having a conversation with you in the car one day, and you felt a little bit almost embarrassed, if that's the right word, to talk about what you were doing. You felt that was like, I don't know, I don't want to use a disparaging word whatsoever, but you felt that was almost like as a weakness or something like that to talk about, that you were taking your money and that you were making a plan B, that you were preparing for another day. Can you walk me through why? And can you walk me through why you were doing amazing things that you should be super proud of, and I know you're super proud of now, because I want to ask you a follow-up question to this. But why was that just so unwelcome territory for you to talk about in the locker room?
Yeah, so I mean, the reason why that was the case is early on, I wasn't sure if I was right. I was doing my own research. I had my own thesis, essentially. Like, I'm like, everybody's investing in stock market and venture capital. They're doing this. But my thing was like, I want to replace my income. What investment vehicles is going to replace my income? And I'm like, the stock market goes up and down. If I have a year where I need $120,000 and the stock market's down, like the math wasn't mapping to me on how that's going to work year in and year out. So real estate became like, all right, I'm doubling down. This is what I think is the way. But I'm talking in the locker room, and I'm asking guys about syndications and building your own real estate portfolio and, you know, different things. And there just wasn't many guys doing it. And then in the NFL, there's this notion of like, keep focus on football, keep the main thing. And that always frustrated me, because if you look at the star players, like let's say Patrick Mahomes, for instance, he's balling on the football field, but he owns a soccer team, and he's doing Prime, and he's like part owner of Prime, and he's on commercials. But when it's anybody else but the star player, what you get in the locker room is like, oh, you need to focus on football. Or, oh, like I would get comments like, DK, you going to post one of your little videos on real estate? You know, you really like, just like the little smart Alex, snarky comments that like was frustrating to hear and made me feel like, dang, am I doing the right thing? But I stayed at it because I really believed in what I was doing. And at this point in time, it's came full circle, you know, just, you know, earlier, a couple of days ago, I'm speaking to the San Francisco 49ers and their whole team about real estate investing and things like that. So it's kind of funny that the same kind of guys that would make those comments to me are in my DMs asking for advice.
It's funny. That was the perfect segue. Look, Devon, you've successfully kind of burned your boat now. You're a civvy. You're out in the real world. You're one of us now, right? And so you're on the other side. You're in a new pond, right? Can you tell me what your current state of mind is? Because I'm in the same boat as well, in that I've been down that, like, you know, super high earning, you know, laser focused, only thing I'm working on. And unfortunately for me, like you, I was planting these seeds along the way, right? And we find ourselves now in this new pond. And for me, you know, I've stepped away from living homes, as you know, and you've stepped out of the NFL. But I recall going through the last recession, like in 2006 and 7 and 8, like really big one, right? And just how that just came in. I can only just describe that for myself and millions of other people as like an absolute tornado in their lives, right? Because I was in real estate at that time, and so disruptive to my overall psyche. That's like a tearing your ACL event, right, in real estate, and particularly not as a real estate investor, in my case, but as just an active real estate worker, right? Just working in the industry, if you will. But now that I built up residual income, that can't be AI'd away. That can't be taken away. Nobody can call me tomorrow and just say, hey, listen, all that stuff is gone. Nobody can call you tomorrow and say, hey, Devon, we're going to cut you. You're out, right? And the irony is that you're not making millions anymore. You're making, let's say, we'll call it tens of thousands, right? But you're not making millions. And here's a question, right? Can you tell me about your current state of mind? Now that you're out of the NFL, but you have these seeds and your expenses, to your point, are covered every month. And I know you, and I know that you're always growing to put more cash flow in against those expenses. I know that I get a great deal of just the anxiety that I used to suffer from financially and otherwise is largely gone because I did this stuff when I was younger. Can you walk me through your current state of mind? Now you're not in the NFL, you're not making millions. It's kind of more humble. You still live a very big life, don't get me wrong. But can you walk me through your current state of mind?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by saying, like, rest in peace to a lot of players that have passed, whether, you know, suicide, health issues. But I posted something the other day. There's a lot of athletes that struggle when they retire, and it's financial distress, relationship distress, identity crisis. There's just so many factors. And I would say I'm on the other end of it of like, all right, I put myself in position. I was preparing for this moment at pretty much as soon as I started. But I can honestly say, and I'm unapologetic about it, it's hard. Like, you know, when you're in the spotlight and your phone's off the hook and you're used to being on billboards and all this transition has not been
Right.
easy. And that's for someone who's, has been preparing for it as soon as I got in it.
Right.
So, I got to acknowledge that first, because a lot of guys, we're tough, macho guys, and it's hard to admit that, like, hey, life is good, but like this has been a transition. Like, transitioning out of the NFL and out of that lifestyle into regular life, even for, someone, I'm having success and I'm doing a lot, and a lot of good things are happening in my life, but it's not easy. So, that to start, but then to piggyback on what you were saying, I have peace though, because I'm not in financial distress. Like,
Yeah.
I think that is the linchpin that ruins a lot of guys. Is it's like, you made millions of dollars and you created this very expensive lifestyle. You're paying for your mortgage, your mom's mortgage,
Yeah.
3 or 4 cars. And even if you were blessed enough to make a ton of money, that whole concept of every month that money is going down and down, and you need to figure out, how are you going to offset it? What do I invest in? You still got to learn. Like, if I didn't do what I was doing, I didn't plant those seeds, as you worded it, I would be in a much tougher spot, because I'm spending X amount of money a month, but it's not coming in. Now you're like working extra hard to learn what to invest in. You start to make mistakes because you're on a time crunch. Like, you don't start investing, you're going to run out of money. That's a hard dichotomy to be in. And I've taken that off the table for myself, to where, now I get to sit back and watch the fruits of my labor start to plant and grow and make strategic moves moving forward. And I challenge everybody, no matter what age you're at, where you're at in your career. It would have been great if you started a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but the next best day is to start now, and to start to build that for yourself now. And some people might listen to this and like, oh, be admired because I started when I was younger, but then think they're not in that mindset, or it's too late for them because they're 45 or and if you would have started when you were 22, that would have been amazing. But start now, start doing it now. And I recommend that to any and everybody.
It's kind of like the saying of that, I wish I started yesterday, but hey, you can start today, right? So you can impact that. And David and I talked, we just finished an episode where it's like the continuous theme is like, you have to take action. And if you make a choice not to take any action, that in itself is going to, you're not delaying your gratification. You're taking everything right now. You're not driving that 2005 Kia, are you willing to drive that 2005 Kia so that you can live a much lower anxiety life in the future, right? And it's like, are you going to take all your chips off the table, or are you going to leave some chips on the table and let them grow and plant more seeds and then take the fruits of your labor, right? So, and I'm interested, Devon, because to your point, like, a lot of people are going to say, oh, woe is me, you make millions of dollars. But what I think is a challenge that I'd be interested to hear what you face is like, if I do X industry, right? Let's say I'm in sales for a fill the blank company, right? I'm 45 years old, right? And I'm still have a lot of value to bring to the table, and the company lets me go, right? I can kind of just go across the street, show them my resume, and say, guys, look, I've got all these sales, all this big resume. You are in a position where you can't go across the street anymore, right? Like, your boat is 1000% burned, and you're not able to do that. So you're actually in a tougher position, because you've been training. If you can imagine, to the person listening, is that they've been training in their same field for 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And all of a sudden, like, you not only are you fired, but you can't do any of that anymore that you just did. Like, and that's basically what the NFL did to you. So it's like, although yes, you've made a lot of money over time, now you have to go to a completely different thing. Now, obviously, a lot of the skill sets that you took from sports, you can translate indirectly into the next field that you go in, but you don't get an option. Like, there's no going back for you. There's no going and playing you're not over there playing the UFL now. You're not doing any of that stuff anymore. Talk to us a little bit about, now that you've transitioned into the real estate side. I know you were in Tampa, you were in San Francisco. What messages are you kind of delivering to, you were talking to athletes, right, about like ways to be able to be more financially responsible. Talk to us a little bit about some of the messages that you're giving to, that may translate to just your typical listener that's in a similar situation right now, because I know you're trying to make changes and you're trying to basically, you're trying to teach a man how to fish, right? You're not just handing him a fish. It's like you're trying to teach him how to fish. Talk to us a little bit about that in terms of the message that you're trying to deliver.
So it goes two ways for me. So with athletes, the challenge now is there's some guys, if you're good enough with how much the NFL pays you, they think they're gonna get away with just like, I'm good enough, I'm gonna get a big enough contract to where it's not gonna really matter.
Right.
In the regular world, somebody who can just, all right, I get fired here, but I can go to the next company. All right, so you might be able to do your industry. You might not be at that job, but you might be able to do your industries till you're 50, 60, 70 years old.
Right.
Fine. But my challenge to that player and that, employee, business person, what have you, is put yourself in a position to where you don't have to do it though. Even if you plan on making enough money, like, hey, I'm top 5 corner in the league, I'm about to get a huge check.
Right.
I'm not worried about the finance side. Or I'm in IT and AI and I'm like, I know how to use it. I'm going to have a job for the next 40 years. I can tune out this podcast. My challenge is put yourself in a position to where you still don't need it. And you get to do it because you want to, not because you have to. And chase that. So, when I'm talking to guys, it's like, fine, like maybe you are going to get, like, a lot of things could happen to where that next deal doesn't come, but let's assume it is. You're right. You're going to get that big check. Why not put yourself in a position financially with your investments in your portfolio to where it's great if and when that contract comes, but you're going to be good regardless. And same with the workers. So that pivot in like, okay, I got it with and without football. I got it with this career lane that I'm in, or without it. Chase that, because that's really protecting and providing for your family and putting yourself in a position to be financially stable regardless. And I think that's the new American dream, is getting to a place where you can do what you want, when you want, where you want, and how you want, and nobody can tell you otherwise. And when I say nobody, that means your boss, that means the NFL, that means the career path. Yep. So that's kind of my challenge, because sometimes I can get tuned out. And, what goes with that, you mentioned my car again, and at least in the sports world, there's some people who's like, come on, dog, I'm not doing that. I'm not driving the 2005. And I always want to address that. It's like, my dream car was always a Mercedes S550 and or a Range Rover Autobiography. I'm driving one of those cars now. It's not that I didn't have that desire. It's delayed gratification that I'm going to do it with income coming in other than football. I'm going to use football income, invest it, and then buy some of the things that I want with auxiliary income from my investments. So, I always tell people, it's not that you can't have the things that you want. It's how you go about getting them and putting yourself. I think that's a real flex when you can use your earned income from your career, learn to invest it, start to generate income that's going to pay you for long periods of time, and then buy some of the things that you always wanted, or travel, or, whatever your thing is. So, that's kind of my message to people in that position. And I really want to talk to, obviously, athletes, but also just highly successful career people, business entrepreneurs, because that's a shift in mindset that I think could impact and change a lot of lives.
I want to highlight what you just said. What you just said is one of the most important financial lessons anybody on this earth can learn. You take your earned income and you drive around in a Ford Pinto, right? And you park your ego. You take that earned income, you invest that earned income, you take all the sacrifices, delay the gratification, invest that earned income, and those investments will then start to throw off perpetual income in infinity, right? You take the income from those investments and you can blow it on candy. You can buy your boat or you can do whatever. But now you're not spending the nest egg. You're spending the nest egg is always growing. You're not ever eating into, that earned income. I think that's gold. And that's something that I'm teaching my own kids. Every single time my kids get pocket money, I challenge them. Do you want to spend it or do you not want to spend it? And I give them the option of spend, 30% of it and invest 30% of it. And they invest it with me. So they just literally give it to me. I put it onto a little spreadsheet and I have a rate of return and they can see it. every month. They say, Daddy, can I see my investments? And the goal is, and my daughter gets this now. She's 8, and she's got a decent amount invested at this point. Now, they only invest with Daddy, right? So, but she's going to buy a house because she wants to have a tenant. She really, really wants to get her house, get a bank loan, and have a tenant. But then she realizes that she can spend about $300-400 a month on all the toys and all the stuff, and Game Boys, whatever it is that she wants to buy. But she gets it. And so that's a key takeaway right there. I just want, if we take nothing else from this podcast, what Devon has just said, probably the most important thing, anybody earning income. Because you know what, Devon? I lived in New York, and I knew a lot of very I wouldn't say wealthy, well-paid people in New York, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year, right? And they were living paycheck to paycheck. Sounds mind-blowing, right? But it's true. Paycheck to paycheck. All they kept on doing, upgrading nicer apartments, nicer parts of town. They get that, 2-bedroom or 5-bedroom brownstone in Chelsea, and all the fancy shoes, and eating in the nicest restaurants with their earned income. And I remember you're crazy. That's craziness. I'm going to pivot. Devon, what has been your challenge? We're going to talk about real estate for a minute. What has your challenge been? So just to give the listeners some context, when I met you, you were busy as they come in the NFL world. And for anyone who thinks that the NFL players got a lot of time in their hands, I've spoken to you. You didn't have a lot of time in your hands, right?
Definitely not.
Definitely not. And so you started out working with a lot of syndications, Devon. And then, when you start getting more time on your hands, you broke out into two real categories. One was hard money lending, which is a great way of increasing your monthly income, and investing, physically buying homes, actually renovating them, actually putting tenants in them. Can you tell me that journey from investing in syndications into setting up your own lending platform, into actually buying and renovating properties that have, big chunks of equity, but maybe not so much cash flow in this high interest rate environment? Can you tell me where your challenges were there, or what route? Let's work with the challenges. What were your challenges getting into real estate, Devon?
Yeah, so I bought my first property after my rookie season, and it was in Beech Grove, Indiana. And the first challenge I met was I met someone in Indiana that essentially did what you used to do. They're a turnkey provider, and I bought a property, but then they met an institutional buyer and ghosted me. So I bought one property. My plan was to own 10 to 20 properties out there. It was cheap as dirt, cash flowed outstanding out of the time. So I'm like, this makes sense. I bought one property, and then I get ghosted, not responding to emails, not responding to texts. So it's like, my return on that one property was great, but it's like, it was an $86,000 property. I put 12 in with a partner. Like, it wasn't going to change my life, or impact my life. And I'm like, I can't scale this. So after that, I start getting into syndications, because I'm like, I didn't really know how to find other turnkey providers at the time. So I start getting into syndications. I'm learning more about that. And my niche into syndications was, I found a financial advisor that all he did was vet syndications across the country. And so he would bring me opportunities, teach me how he was underwriting them, why he thought it was good. It was a great experience. I only like working with people who I feel like I can add value to, and it's mutually beneficial.
Right.
And I was learning, but he was providing me opportunities. It was great. So I start getting into syndications. And what I loved about that is a lot of syndications have an 8% preferred return, a 70-30 split of 70 to investors like me, the limited partners, 30% to the general partners. It made a lot of sense. And as I started maturing and growing and learning more, I still appreciate syndications, but it's like, there's something about owning your own properties, controlling the risk profile, having say, being able to refinance, and I was missing out on that with the syndication. So after a couple of years, I started buying my own properties, but the numbers weren't cash flowing as great as I wanted to anymore. And I was getting more experience in real estate, which I wanted to find opportunities to buy just from turnkey providers that were selling me on market, essentially what you used to do. I was like, can I get in and renovate it myself and do that. And you know, that's where I met you guys and how I got connected with you guys. I finally was able to find and get into the duplex and a sixplex where I was able to get in early, do the renovations myself, and see build in some of the equity, build in some of the appreciation, and you know, still cash flow. So that's been awesome for me and kind of my path forward that I really want to lean into, you know, in the Tampa market. And I'm trying to do some of the same things in Arizona. And I still like the Kansas City market. So, you know, it's been an evolution of growth. I felt like turnkey was great for me early in my career because I didn't want to renovate. I didn't know enough about it. But as I grew and matured, it was like syndications made sense. But now it's like, as I get out of those syndications, I want to invest more in my own assets and keep growing my portfolio because I feel like I have more say so and more flexibility in being able to leverage that.
I love the Indiana. What did you say? It was Beach Grove, beachfront?
Grove, Indiana. Yeah.
And it was anywhere but on the beach, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, absolutely not on the beach.
So it's funny because you said, well, you know, obviously you weren't going to retire on that one property going in, you know, but I think that you took the action young and you went in with a partner and you probably still were at 86,000, but the experience that you got, you're like, wait a second, this thing is a cash flow monster from the get-go. And I think that you took the leap and then it started to give you confidence to be like, all right, this is cool, but the guy ghosted me. Let me pivot a little bit, go to syndications, but you still have that experience to kind of pivot back around.
Yeah.
And I think it's so smart that you took the initial thing because so many listeners are so afraid to get out of the dugout, right? They got to step up to the plate and swing the bat. And it's super easy to be able to get in with a turnkey provider where they take a lot of the risk out. There's not going to be equity day one, but look where it got you. Like that's where you started and it springboards you to being able to have more confidence to make more decisions, to make it quicker. You just bought a sixplex in St. Pete and it was like a week. It took you like a day to make a decision on that. And you're underwriting, you know, almost a 7-figure asset. But you can almost trace that back maybe to the Beach Grove, Indiana, to where you,
Absolutely.
a lot of people look at starting a rental portfolio and they put so much emphasis on the numbers of like this first property. And what they don't understand is that it's not about that one property. It's not about the cash flow of that one. It's about getting in the club. It's about getting the confidence to get to the next one, to get to 5 rentals, to get to 25, to get to 105. But you don't get to rental number 20 without getting rental number 1, right? And so if I'm hearing you, it sounds like that may have made a bigger deal on you more than just what numbers are on the spreadsheet.
Yeah, that was the best investment I ever made. And I ended up selling the property because I couldn't scale there, but I invested $12K. I cash on cash returned double digits every year for like 5 years. And then I sold it and I pocketed 26. So I got got 26K plus a 10% cash. Like it was an outstanding investment and it was a turnkey property. Like, you know, it was renovated. It already had a tenant in it. So I would tell all your listeners, like, there is nothing wrong with base hits, especially as you're starting out. Like nothing wrong with it at all. And in today's interest rate environment, a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines because it doesn't look sexy with an interest rate. Build a buy box that fits with what the market is doing right now. And it's okay if you get a base hit, especially while early on, because a base hit, if you're planning on holding for 5-10 years, can turn into a double or a triple and lead in. And even if it doesn't, if it stays a base hit, the experience you're going to get from it can turn into so much more. And that 26K plus the 10%, like that's a great return, but the actual money amount didn't change my life. Right. But the deal and the experience did. And it led me into buying. I ended up having 8 properties in Ohio. I sold those because I hate Ohio, but I ended up buying a bunch in Kansas City and I still own and going to buy there. Like that one property led me to you guys. It led me to want to invest in Arizona. My wife became an agent and she's in real estate now. And I stem it all back to Beach Grove, Indiana, and that one property.
Beach Grove, baby.
And you know what, Devon, you're only getting started. Is the truth of the matter. You what age are you now, Devon?
I'm 32.
You are 32 years of age. You are the most mature 32-year-old. I'm telling you, there's not that many 32-year-olds that have led your life already. Like I genuinely thought you were going to say 36, but you're like 32. Oh my God. Devon, you are only getting started. in your life, and you're only getting started in what you're going to be capable of doing. I've watched you grow and I've watched you learn. I've watched the pace at which you're able to take advantage and understand. You're just talking about a lot of people sitting on the sidelines. And I want to go back to a conversation you and I had a week ago. For you guys out there listening, I was having a chat with Devon. He had a wholesaler had reached out to him in Arizona, and I commend that hard work in Arizona. Our hard working wholesaler found you,
Yeah.
gave you a call, and said, "Hey, listen, I've got this deal, and you have a team." Now we're going to talk about teams in a minute, but you have a team here, and that me, Clark, Anthony, our property manager, our contractors, our subcontractors, and all of that, right? And so you can reliably operate in this city, knowing this infrastructure. Had you got this call 2 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to transact, right? The only way you are able to transact is because you have a reliable team on the ground here, right? And even with that team, this is what the question is coming here. Even with that team, I want everybody to understand that real estate boils down to doers and procrastinators. Doers do and understand. I've done it. I've taken the plane off the ground 1,000 times with no wings, no landing gear, no engine, no fuel. I have flown the plane, half built so many times in my life, and I've built it in the air, right? And I want to commend you because you called me the other day, and the wholesaler was calling your time out, right? So you looked at it, the wholesaler was like, if you don't buy it, if you don't send, $30,000 over the next hour, I'm going to sell it to somebody else, right? And you and I had a phone call, and like, David, what would you do? Because this was the decision moment, right? I described it to you as like, Devon, what all that's happened here is the ball has just snapped. You're in defense. You got the analogy, obviously. The ball's just snapped, and everything in the world's going to happen in the next second, right? But you just slow it down. I say, okay, what's the rational decisions to make here? And you played a blinder, I want to credit you for that. It's like we looked at it, we looked logically at what the opportunity was. You called a wholesaler out, and sure enough, wholesaler calls you back the next. Wholesaler's like, okay, if you don't send it 30,000 right now, I'm going to sell it to somebody else. We talked about it. So sure, that wholesaler was going to call you on Monday morning, say, is your deal still on the table? Because his other investor is going to start learning what's going on, right? We both did that at the same time, ironically enough. And sure enough, on Monday morning, you offered him $90 or $70 or $80,000 less. You say, yeah, no, that was my offer on Friday. My offer is now 70, 80, which actually made the deal happen. That paid for a good chunk of what that renovation is going to be. And I want to know what emotionally you felt like in that moment, right? So you're making $1 million decision. The guy, pushing you to make the decision right now. How walk us through just what you were feeling in that time.
Yeah, I've never been in that situation. So I was kind of like, whoa, because from the start, I got a deal that I didn't think been getting a lot of wholesale deals in different markets, Arizona specifically. I know a lot here. You guys are mostly my deal finders in Tampa. So like I wasn't expecting a call. So it was good work from this random wholesaler hitting me up and pressing me down. Yeah. But I didn't think it was going to make sense. And then I started doing underwriting and like, it was penciling out pretty well to me, but I'm big on like trusting people I have around me and people that I've done business with. So it being your guys' market, I immediately wanted to get your guys' sense on it and hearing your guys' response. But then I was pushed to that deadline and it didn't feel right. Like I felt like it was a pretty good opportunity, but I don't like being rushed to that extent. I have no problem in making a decision. Like I'll bust the move but it just felt too rushed. So it was Friday and I'm like, this is too fast. All right, if you got another seller or buyer, go ahead. And I was like, dang, oh well, like at the end of the day, I didn't know about this deal a couple of days ago. It's gone. So I ended up, I was getting on a flight to go to a wedding in Cabo and have a great weekend. And Monday morning comes around, and it's funny. Both of you guys separately both said that you thought he would come back around. So you guys are little wizards. Like there's no way. And as you guys were explaining it, I was kind of like, another buyer who's willing to close this fast, and that's like, I'm like, that's hard. So I forgot about the deal. I was over it, but being able to get over the deal gave me leverage, because it was like, I don't need the deal anymore. Like my offer, that they wanted 670, and that's what I was gonna pay, and I ended up paying 610 for it. So 60K shave, because over the weekend they tried to hardball me on Friday, and Monday I didn't need the deal anymore. So that's a start. And then my experience with the first deal helped me a lot. Trust with the team, having a good team on base. Like I feel like Tampa and with you guys is the market I feel overall the most comfortable with. So I won't be surprised over the next decade if I end up owning 100 units out there with your guys' help. But like there's other markets I invest in, but I have to have the team in place, contractor, property manager, somebody finding me good deals, etc. And so having that was very helpful. And what made me finally decide to go ahead and pull the trigger is I look at worst case scenarios. And on that deal, I don't mind talking numbers. Like I felt pretty confident that worst case, I can get a gross 8K a month in rents. And best case, it could do similar to my other 10 sixplex and be 10K, between 10 and 11K. That was best case. Worst case, rents right now we're at 6,700, and the place needs a big renovation. And I felt pretty confident I can up it at least 1,300 with renovations. So I was running the numbers at that worst case, and I got hard numbers on taxes and insurance. And I was basing those numbers. I'm like, can I deal with my worst case scenario? And it didn't look as great. And I overestimated my rehab budget. So I knew what I spent on the other sixplex, and I'm like, this one's going to be worse. I'm going to spend another 60K than I spent on that one. And the number still, like, it wouldn't have been, it's not going to be as great if I spend 60K more and only get 8K a month in rents. But I looked at those numbers and I was like, you know what? I won't be mad, and it's still a pretty good deal if it plays out this way.
Right.
And that was my final decision on, like, I'm going to pull the trigger on this, because I think this is just about my worst case, and it's still a good deal. And over 5 or 10 years, I'm not going to care. It's not going to pencil out as great in the first year or two if that's the case, but in 5 or 10, I'm going to still be very happy. But if it plays the other way, it's going to be a great deal right off the bat. So that was kind of my thinking process, and why I was like, you know what, I'm going to pull the trigger, and I did it in a week.
It's your future self is going to thank you, Devon. It's like you may put in 150 grand into it, and it may cash flow, $400 or $500 a month, maybe after all your debt service. And no one would do that day one deal, because that's so much work and so much brain damage. But in 5 years, when you're sitting on $600,000 in equity, and it's a cash flow monster, everyone's going to look back at you and say, "Oh, you got so lucky, you bought this," and no one sees the 150K renovation, the moving tenants out, tenning it, dealing with termites. No one sees that. They'll just see the nice end pictures that you have on Zillow, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, you bought that and you got lucky, right? Well, you just keep doing that, and it just keeps compounding on itself, and it's just rinse and repeat. You have the confidence to do it now in your different markets, and you set up your different networks. And everyone listening should take is that you took a risk in Ocean Field, Indiana, a long time ago, and it has just compounded to where it's quit you now. And now you're buying 6 units, not one, right? And then in 5 years, we're going to be talking about the 160 unit that you weren't sure about, right? But you keep having to put yourself in slightly uncomfortable positions, surround yourself with the right network, surround yourself with the right capital, and you're able to make quicker decisions than other people, because obviously we knew in that situation, that guy didn't have another guy that was, a buyer that was going to close in 12 minutes, like he said he was. You call his bluff. And in this market, and I'll be interested to see, but in this market, you are able to call people's bluffs, And it is BS, right? 2 years ago, there was a guy that was going to close in 12 minutes on that property, but we're not in 2021 anymore. This is 2024. Interest rates are not going anywhere. And, I took away something is that call their bluff, say, hold yourself strong and say, this is my number. And if you don't like that number, it's all good. I'm going to park this, put it away, forget about it, go to Cabo, have some cocktails, enjoy myself. And if it's there when I get back, great. If it's not, there'll be another deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that's what it boils down to is your ability. But David, you said something, and it's like, I think a superpower I have at this point is the ability to pull the trigger when it's time to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
A lot of people can't or won't, and trusting myself and surrounding myself with people I respect and trust in mutually beneficial relationships have helped me with that. But I've made a lot of money investing by learning as much as I can, trying to get smart people around me in mutually beneficial relationships, and mitigating as much risk as I can and pulling the trigger. When it lines up, you got to go. Showing the ability to be able to do that strengthens your opportunities and your relationships.
Well, there's a book sitting right behind you, Devon. It's called It All Adds Up. Okay. And this is Devon Kennard's book. It All Adds Up. And you've just summarized it right there. You're able to do these things because of all the things you did before.
Mm-hmm.
It all adds up. And the things that you're going to do in the future are going to be the product of what you're doing today. 6 unit will lead to a 16 unit. A 16 unit will lead to a 100 unit. Now, at some point in time, you're 32. But at some point in time, we don't even know where you're going to go. But I tell you what, I'm going to enjoy watching your life. I am honored to know you. I am going to sit in the later years of my life. I'm always going to have a very, very keen interest in you, your lovely wife, Camille, and your family, and see where you guys go. You should be very proud of yourselves. I know you are. It all adds up, Devon. And the very best of luck with your new authoring project with Bigger Pockets. I saw that you're working away on that, and I've no doubt that is going to be super successful when it comes out. Any release date yet, Devon, or no?
It's going to be towards the end of the year. So the manuscript is done. It's going through editing and cover art and, all that. So it's in the publishing's hands at this point, but it's, it's good. I haven't, it's not official, but it's probably going to be called Real Estate Side Hustle. So your listeners get the inside scoop on the name. And, man, I just want to thank you guys. I mean, you guys have been a huge part of my growth the last couple of years, and helping me kind of take the next step in my real estate picture. And I love your guys' market, the teams you guys have in place, and what you guys are doing. So there's no doubt, Tampa and working with you guys is going to be a large part of my portfolio moving forward. And, both of those 6 units, like you guys said, is probably going to turn to you guys helping me buy a 50 unit or 100 unit in the next couple of years. So I'm excited to keep building with you guys, and I'll come on the podcast anytime.
All the love, man. We love it. There's mutual love on both sides. They're all 3 sides of this Zoom call. Where can people find you? Where you said that the book's coming out toward the end of the year. Where do you want them to go to? How can they reach out to you if they want to talk to you about? Because you're into a lot of things we didn't have time to get into, but you're into a lot of hard money and raising capital and things like that. So I'm sure a lot of people might want to get in touch with you about that. Where can they go to find you at, Devon?
Yeah, so I'm on social media at my name, Devon Kennard, and then you could go to devonkennard.com and my website. I try to keep that up to date with stuff I have going on, and my book release when that's coming up. And my lending company is called 42 Solutions, private lending company. Been really growing that as a cash generator for me. So you can find that at weare42solutions.com, and that's been going great. And yeah, reach out. I'm pretty responsive. So try to get back to anybody who reaches out, and I appreciate it.
And with that, we're going to bid you all farewell. Devon, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. And, we'll see you around the corner somewhere.
Awesome. Talk to you guys soon, man.
Well done, guys. Well, wow, Clark, there you have it. What a if that was our first interview, I hope they're anyway nearly as good as that going forward.
Yeah.
What a great, great conversation, right?
Devon set the bar high, David. So, I hope our next guest can kind of keep up and level up to that, because that's going to be tough. He did such a great job. David, I'll just throw a few quick takeaways. It was a great interview. He covered so many different things. We probably could have done that interview for another 45 minutes. One of the big things that stuck out to me is how he humanized these people that we idolize, right? And everyone has different people they idolize, whether they're sports figures or they're musicians or whatever it is that they do. But we kind of look at them on a pedestal, right? And when they fall, right, when they fail, if and when they fail, it's almost like a car wreck, and like people enjoy seeing that. And it was really, really cool to see how he broke it down and basically shared and related, like, just because they may have a few extra zeros at the end of their paycheck, they still go through the same challenges, the same fears, the same anxiety that anyone does, right? And it's just so relatable to that. And like ultimately, once the music stops on that type of field that you're in, whether you're a pro athlete or a rock star or whatever, once that music stops, like, it's real life, and that money doesn't last forever. So him kind of diving into that was super helpful. Another thing too that I thought was cool is that when he was talking about, a lot of times you may not burn your boats, but your boats get burned for you by like the company that you work for. And it was really interesting, because I've noticed this with some of my own network, is that a lot of times you don't just walk in one day and get fired because that's just how the boss felt on that day, right? Your boats may have been getting burned by that company for a year or 2 years, and you chose not to see those signs. You chose to ignore those signs and say, oh, that's an oddity. That's not going to happen to me. And he talked about that, and it literally made me think about some of my own experiences with my own network, where it's like, complain about this or complain about that, and it's like, they're burning your boats. Maybe they haven't burned it all the way, but they're about ready to pull the rug out from underneath you. And you can either choose to see it and prepare, or you can just act like it's not there, and then you walk in one day and you're fired and you're surprised. But are you really that surprised? So those were kind of my takeaways. I had a lot more, but we just kind of want to be brief here on kind of our big takeaways. But super high character guy. I love it. Him being able to be humble and share a lot of his fears and things. Not everyone can do that, and especially like a big tough guy that played in the NFL. I can imagine it's even harder. So I appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll have Devon back on. David, on your side, what did you see? What did you take away? What do you think the listeners should take away from that conversation?
You know what? Vaughn worked hard. He had, unique genetic, attributes, but worked his tail off. Even then, he caught lightning in a bottle, and he knows it. He's humble about it.
Yeah.
And I think many humans that would be listening to this podcast have also done the same thing. We have these moments in our lives where we do super well for a while, right? So you might take a band and they have a number one hit, but then they're one hit wonders.
Right.
But in Devon's case, Devon was humble enough to understand. He was smart enough and he was mature enough to understand that, yeah, I'm like super well paid, but this is not going to last forever, right? And it's incredible how what we talk about in this podcast is quite general, right? But it's general for a reason, because the bottom line is that there are stages to wealth, and the first stage is the money earning stage. Now, in fairness, Devon's was really super fast forwarded. He was making millions of dollars in his 20s, where most of us are not. But there are many of us who do get to that point in our 30s or our 40s, or indeed in our 50s, right? So it might take your average human in that money-making phase, a decade longer. But that is only the first phase. creating sustainable wealth and beyond, $20 million or whatever number it might be. It sounds like an awful lot of money, and it is an awful lot of money. But by the time you pay your agents, your taxes,
Right.
to Devon's point, all the lifestyle creep and whatnot, by the time you do all that, it's not uncommon for anybody to start to run out of capital. And so I thought it was my big takeaway was how normal his financial anxiety kind of is, in that he's not he's not worried about paying his electric bill next week. And many people who are listening to this podcast are not worried about, their car payment, or their next vacation. Most people listening to this are not worried about that stuff. But what they are worried about, and what this podcast is about, is how to create life-altering, sustainable income and wealth. Right? I said income and wealth. And Devon's challenges in that area, which he aired very, very eloquently, were exactly the same as yours and mine and you, the listener, exactly the same as yours. So many of us have the same challenges. We need to earn money, but then that does not equip us at all to be investors or to create sustainable income and wealth. And so Devon is as challenged in that area as the next guy.
Right.
So he's got a little bit more capital, maybe, than your average Joe, but he still has the same anxieties. And I thought that was just a fabulous, fabulous episode if you're driving around in your car right now, or you're in the gym, or whatever it is, and however you've listened to that podcast, if you think an NFL star, right, has exactly the same,
Right.
anxieties and challenges that you do, you're not so alone. We're not so alone.
Right.
Burn your boats is a concept that, and I loved when he said this, by the way. He said, your boats are being burned right now, if you know it or not. Right. Which harks back to that. We had a number of episodes where we talked about entropy. If you know it or not, your life is changing all the time. And so that's why you have to be prepared all the time for when your boats get burned, or when for some reason you get pulled out of the game, or you get that phone call that, right now you can't be the earner that you are right now. What's plan B? And I thought he really, really hit that part of it. So that's my takeaway, Clark. I thought it was just very humbling to hear a 10-year NFL veteran walk us through exactly what our podcast is about. Burning boats, setting yourself up for financial security in the future. And I thought he did an amazing job, and I thought it was a great interview.
I'll tell you, David, I was genuinely, I feel like I had, like, the hair on my arms was standing up a few times. Like, I was inspired. So I give Devon high tips for it's very motivating, and I was inspired. So I love it. So Devon, great interview. I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon. To the listeners, we hope you enjoyed this. Please, help us if you like this. Give us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. And if you have any questions, or you want to reach out, or you have questions about what Devon had to say, please DM us on Instagram or TikTok or whichever platform you use the most. And we're very thankful for our listeners for reaching out and giving us comments and things like that. They're all very inspiring to us. And if you have other topics or things that you would like us to talk about, we'd love to hear from you. So with that, David, I bid everyone adieu, and we appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats podcast on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at burnyourboatswealth.com. Thank you for listening.